Welcome to The Explainer. We're going to start today with a bit of a political riddle. How is it possible for one country to have three presidents all at the same time? Well, to figure that one out, we really have to dive deep into the fascinating and pretty complex story of Bosnia and Herzegovina. It's a place that's been shaped by huge empires, heartbreaking conflict, and a political setup that is truly one of a kind.
And that question, three presidents, it's not just some quirky piece of trivia. It's actually the key that unlocks the whole story of modern Bosnia and Herzegovina. I know, it sounds totally impossible, right? But believe it or not, that's how their government actually works. So to really get how that's even possible, we need to first understand what makes this country so unique.
And a big part of the answer really comes down to its identity. You have to think of this place as a literal crossroads, a meeting point for different cultures, different religions, and these massive empires that have come and gone over hundreds of years.
Okay, so if you look at the numbers today, you can really see that diversity in action. The country is home to three main groups, and they're actually called constituent peoples right in the constitution. It's an official term. You've got the Bosniaks, who are mostly Muslim, the Serbs, who are mostly Orthodox Christian, and the Croats, who are mostly Catholic. And this isn't something that just happened overnight. This incredible mix is the result of a really long and layered history.
And geographically, it's always been smack dab on a fault line between these huge powers. Think about it. This is where the Ottoman East and the Austro-Hungarian West didn't just shake hands. They collided, they mixed, they merged, and they created this completely unique cultural landscape that, honestly, you just won't find anywhere else on Earth.
So how did this all come together? How did this mix happen? Let's do a quick trip back in time and see how all these different layers got built up over the centuries.
It all starts way back with an independent kingdom in the Middle Ages. But then it gets shaped by these two massive and very different empires. First come the Ottomans, who stayed for more than 400 years. Then the Austro-Hungarians take over. And both of them left a huge mark before, finally, the whole region was pulled together with its neighbors to form Yugoslavia.
And each of these periods brought massive changes. The Ottomans, for instance, introduced Islam, which became a major faith right alongside Orthodox Christianity and Catholicism. Then the Austro-Hungarians came in and brought industrialization, new laws, modern infrastructure. And then Yugoslavia tried to kind of weave all these different threads into one single tapestry, creating this shared South Slavic identity that actually held things together for a good long while.
But in the late 20th century, that union, the one that had held all these different people together for decades, it didn't just fray, it started to violently shatter. And this was the moment, really, that would tragically redefine the entire nation. So as Yugoslavia was breaking apart, Bosnia and Herzegovina had this huge, fateful choice to make. They held a referendum on independence in 1992, and it passed. But, and this is a huge but, it was boycotted by most of the Bosnian Serb population. They wanted to stay part of a Yugoslavia led by Serbs. And that division, that deep, unbridgeable gap, plunged the brand new country straight into a horrific 3-year war.
This was a conflict just marked by awful acts of violence. The term ethnic cleansing became horribly famous during this war. It meant that civilians were systematically targeted, forced out of their homes just because of who they were. This happened on a massive scale, and it left scars, deep scars, that are still there today. And the single worst atrocity of the entire war happened in a town called Srebrenica in 1995. The massacre of more than 8,000 Bosniak men and boys. It was so horrific that international courts later officially ruled it was an act of genocide. It's a tragedy that still echoes profoundly to this day. On top of the unimaginable human cost, the physical destruction was just staggering. We're talking about homes, bridges, factories, everything. The damage was estimated to be around 200 billion euros. The entire country was just left in ruins.
The war finally ended in 1995, and the peace deal wasn't signed in Europe, but in Dayton, Ohio, of all places. This agreement, it did its job. It stopped the fighting. But it also created one of the most complicated, intricate, and totally unique political systems you will find anywhere on the planet.
So this Dayton Agreement, it was really two things in one. It was a peace treaty and it was a brand new constitution. The number one goal, of course, was to stop the violence, immediately. But the long-term goal was just as important, to make sure no single ethnic group could ever dominate the others politically. And that goal would shape the country for decades, creating a peace that, while stable, was also incredibly complex.
So how did they do it? Well, the agreement basically split the country into two main parts, or entities. First, you have the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, It's about 51% of the land, and it's mostly home to Bosniaks and Croats. The second part is called Republika Srpska. It covers the other 49% and is mostly home to Serbs. And each of these entities has a ton of power, its own government, its own parliament. It's a very decentralized system.
And this right here brings us all the way back to our first question. At the very top, power is shared in this collective three-member presidency. Here's how it works. One Bosniak and one Croat are elected from the federation entity, and one Serb is elected from the Republika Srpska entity. And to make sure no one person gets too powerful, they literally rotate who's in charge, the chairman, every 8 months. It's this incredibly complex power-sharing machine, all designed to make sure each of the three main groups is represented at the very highest level.
All right, so that's the history and the setup. But what about today? What does this nation, forged in history, remade by this complicated piece, what does it look like now, decades after the war?
Well, the country has made some real progress, for sure. It's now considered an upper-middle-income economy. And its Human Development Index is rated as very high, which basically means solid standards for living, health, and education. But maybe the biggest news for its future came just recently, in late 2022, when it officially became a candidate to join the European Union. That's a huge step and sets a really clear goal for the future.
Now, that doesn't mean it's an easy road ahead. Not at all. That same super complex political system that brought peace, well, it can also lead to political gridlock and make things really difficult to get done. But still, that big goal of joining the EU, that's a powerful reason to push for reforms and work together. It's really pulling the country forward.
So what's next for Bosnia and Herzegovina? You know, that three-member presidency? It's way more than just a political curiosity. It's a living, breathing symbol of the country's biggest challenge. How do you balance all the different identities from your past with the need to build a single shared future? The huge question now is this: can the very system that was designed to end a war be transformed into a system that can build a unified, prosperous country inside of Europe? The next chapter in this incredible story, well, it's being written right now.